I think across the board, in all government departments, it's really, really important that we all do what we can to make sure our armed forces are fit for the future. That is a decision that the Conservative Party fundamentally failed to make over 14 years, leaving our armed forces in a perilous state. And this government is unwilling to make the same mistakes. I've been really clear that there's going to be no cuts to things that we've promised in the Department for Education. I think that's really important. We're investing record amounts, for example, in school buildings and in our schools. But it is important that all government departments play their part and ensure that our armed forces are fit for the future.
The new Andy Burnham administration is likely to take over, which will likely mean all change to the ministerial team. Olivia Bailey is the Minister for Early Education, no doubt hoping to stay on in her post, and she's gamely taking on the post-World Cup early morning interview round. Good morning.
Good morning, good to be here.
Great to have you with us. First question, did you stay up to watch the football?
I'm afraid I had to be in a car at 5 a.m. I'm really sad I missed it, but if I'd tried to do an all-nighter, I'm not sure I'd have made much sense this morning. But I don't know if you managed to watch it. If you did, you're a braver woman than I.
Well, we watched bits of it. We're up early anyway, though, so I think it's kind of a bit different for us. But that is totally fair enough. There will be, though, lots of children around this morning who probably got up to watch it, made it through watching some of it at least. Would you encourage them all to try and make it into school this morning?
Absolutely. My boys are a bit young for that, but I would absolutely encourage kids to get themselves into school this morning. They might feel a bit tired, but it'll be a good day at school. And it's really important they get in there because every day at school matters, even when you're feeling a bit sleepy. And of course, it'll be good to celebrate with their friends too, because what a great result it was.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. It is the NATO summit this week. We should turn to talk about something maybe a bit more serious. Sorry, football fans. The Prime Minister has asked all departments in government to contribute 1% of their capital budgets to fund defence. Where will that money come from in your department?
So we've said that there's going to be some decisions across the board to fund those capital spending, including in DESNES, including in DFT on roads, for example, and the absolute vast majority of all of the spending there is allocated. There's I think about £4 billion over the next 4 years, which will be decided in the usual way through fiscal events.
But the Department for Education will also presumably be contributing 1% of capital budget spend. Is that correct?
It's the case that everybody across government needs to play their part to put this really important investment into our armed forces.
So where will that money come from in your department?
So everything that we've said in the Defence Investment Plan is largely from DFT and from DESNES. All government departments will obviously be playing their part because this is a really important investment that we need to do right the way across the board. And of course, we came in and saw a totally hollowed out armed forces. So it's really important that we're taking that from £54 billion a year when we came in to £80 billion a year, £300 billion over the course of this Parliament, so that we can have the armed forces that we need to deal with these really uncertain times.
No, I understand that, but the point of the question is to try and find out where cuts might come in capital budgets in the Department for Education. If you're saying that there won't be any cuts in that department, that's interesting to know. I don't think you are saying that, though. Do you know where those cuts will come?
As I've said, all government departments need to play their part. There are going to be no cuts to capital projects that we've promised in the Department for Education, but all government departments should rightly play their part in making sure that our armed forces are fit for the future.
So is it fair, in your opinion, for schools and children to have a bit less so that more can be spent on defence?
I think across the board, in all government departments, it's really, really important that we all do what we can to make sure our armed forces are fit for the future. That is a decision that the Conservative Party fundamentally failed to make over 14 years, leaving our armed forces in a perilous state. And this government is unwilling to make the same mistakes. I've been really clear that there's going to be no cuts to things that we've promised in the Department for Education. I think that's really important. We're investing record amounts, for example, in school buildings and in our schools. But it is important that all government departments play their part and ensure that our armed forces are fit for the future.
Money is tight, though, isn't it? I mean, teachers have been told they'll get a 3.5% pay rise from September, but that schools will have to find the first 1% of that. I mean, is it is it fair that schools are forced to shoulder the burden of finding that first 1% when, junior doctors, for example, working in the NHS, they're getting a much bigger pay rise? The NHS doesn't have to do the same.
Well, I think I'm really proud that teachers have been able to get a 17% pay rise over the course of this government, which I think is well deserved. Our teachers do an absolutely fantastic job in our schools. I do think it's fair and reasonable that first 1% is found from within school budgets. There's a precedent for this, and I think that, as I say, teachers deserve this pay rise because they work so hard to give all of our children the very best start.
We'll come back to teachers and what they feel about the pay rise. They wouldn't agree with you that it's particularly generous. But why is it different? Why is it okay for the government to ask schools who are responsible for teaching our young people to fund that 1%, but we don't expect that in the NHS?
Well, it is the case that is across public sector pay rises that public sector organisations have been and are asked to find a contribution towards pay rises. That has happened before in education. It's happened across our public services, and I think that's right. That 1% we think is achievable and reasonable, but we are putting a significant investment in, I think, £1.8 billion to pay for this pay rise over this Parliament, and that's right.
The teaching unions don't agree. The teaching unions don't agree with you. They don't think it is fair or reasonable, and in fact they're now talking about strike action. Will you consider looking again at that pay offer to avoid a potential strike?
Well, I think it's a 17% pay rise over the course of this Parliament. I think this is a good pay offer. I think our teachers deserve it. I think a strike would be a really terrible thing for children and young people, and I'd ask the NEU to really reconsider that.
So that's a no?
I've said what I've said. I think a strike action would be a mistake for children and young people who would miss out on vital education. I think it's a generous pay rise, 17%, significant government investment into it, and I think our teachers deserve that pay rise.
You're talking this morning about breakfast clubs. We've obviously talked before many times on the programme about breakfast clubs. We've heard that message from the Prime Minister, but some parents say they can't use breakfast clubs because there is not the transport for their children to get to the school before it opens. Is the department looking at paying for transport to start earlier so that parents can make use of breakfast clubs?
So we are talking today about the extra 1,400 breakfast clubs that are opening in September, which are helping out parents at the start of the school day, giving kids a really great soft start to the school day. And there's loads of different ways in which schools are running these breakfast clubs. And some, for example, will start them at a different time to match with bus timetables or whatever it may be. But that's up to schools. I'm really pleased and proud that we're funding this 30 minutes of free childcare, a really healthy, nutritious breakfast at the start of the school day, which is going to save parents money and give kids a great way to start the day.
So that's a no then. You will not consider starting bus routes earlier, helping parents get their children to school earlier, because that has been a criticism of this policy. So
to be clear, schools are able to make decisions, as is quite right, in their own context about what works for them. And there are examples of schools that have put their start time a bit earlier or a bit later, or, reflected their local travel situation. But we are funding these breakfast clubs well for schools to pay for this 30 minutes of childcare, for the nutritious breakfast. And it's up to schools to work in their context with their parents to make that work. And I'm really excited as we continue to accelerate this rollout of free breakfast clubs, driving towards every single primary school in England having one by the end of the Parliament.
Some of your colleagues have been a bit shy about admitting where they went to school. Nearly 40 of them who went to private school left it off their Who's Who entry, we find out this morning. Why do you think they might be ashamed of where they went to school?
I don't accept that. I don't think any of my colleagues are ashamed of where they went to school.
Why would they leave it off then?
I have no idea. You get lots of forms when you come into Parliament, and I highly doubt there's any deliberate attempt in this situation. I think I've got wonderful colleagues, a wide range of them with a wide range of backgrounds, and I think all of them contribute massively to Parliament.
Finally, Nigel Farage is under more pressure over funding, over where the money comes from, personal costs. He's claimed that George Cottrell is a personal friend, yet today the Times reveals that Cottrell was handing out business cards with his name on them and Reform UK on the front, including Nigel Farage's personal email address. Are there questions to answer here?
Yeah, really clearly, really serious questions to answer. And, like your listeners, I read your reporting over the weekend with my mouth wide open. It was really shocking. And, I reflect back on when I sat with doing all the paperwork after I had been elected and the thoughts that went through my head, making sure I had said everything that could possibly be needed to be declared. And so I think there are really serious questions to answer for Nigel Farage, and I'm glad that the Parliamentary Standards Commission has had referrals and that there will be investigations in not just to George Cottrell but Chris Harborne and other cases as well.
I'm interested, Olivia Bailey. I asked you a question before that about Labour MPs not putting down their school on their Who's Who entry, and you said, you get a lot of forms when you come into Parliament, it's very easy to miss things off. And I've just asked you about Nigel Farage, and you said, you get a lot of forms when you come into Parliament, and I was very, very careful about answering the questions correctly on all those forms. It can't be both, can it?
Well, it can, I'm afraid, because when I sit down with my Register of Interest forms, seriously though, it's a serious point, because when I sit down with my Register of Interest form, that felt to me like a really important thing to get right. It's really serious. Transparency really matters in politics.
But getting your school right isn't important.
To be honest with my constituents about, and being transparent with my constituents, filling out paperwork for newspaper requests or whatever it may be does take a second order, and I think that's the right way around.
Olivia Bailey, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Interesting. Quite clear. Does it matter is a fair enough question. Who's who doesn't matter, and it's an anachronism. But if you're a Labour Party member of Parliament and you're pretty much one of your only policies coming into this government was going after private schools, and you went to one, I think you deliberately take it off.
I think around 40 of these Labour MPs, 38, I think, 39, leaving it off suggests to me that there might be a feeling maybe that it would be more helpful left off.
Someone here says, not those bloody breakfast clubs again. It is a thing that the government likes to re-announce, doesn't it? And I think some people would say childcare is really important. This is basically not really a breakfast club. It's half an hour free childcare. The government should be doing that. And you might say that's a good policy. It's such a good policy, it feels like it gets announced sort of once every
and also if it's a good policy, put the structure in place around it. There are parents who say, I'd love to take advantage of that, but I can't get my kid into school in time.
Yeah, but equally, this is problem.
But that's fine. That's a question for the government, isn't it? If you're going to announce this policy and you're going to help parents with 30 minutes of free childcare, then you have to think about all the things around it too.
It's an interesting intervention. At what point? This is the problem with government intervention, because there's always another thing they should intervene on. They go open up a breakfast club, or are you getting the transport links? And if they get the transport links, it'll be something else, and it never ends. That's the problem. Once the government starts saying they will play a role in our lives, getting in the way of the parents.